So welcome back, and we will continue our discussion this morning with a panel exploring some of the aspects of those questions we are asking these 2 days. What and who are humans? And since we want to have a very broad discussion, to be inclusive, as we heard we were going to need to be in our first presentation this morning, we have invited a range of scholars to talk about some of these areas where our technology is significantly impacting how we are interacting with one another and how we are reaching out to the people we hope to help. And so we will begin with our first panelist.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm Laura Palazzani. I'm professor of philosophy of law, and I deal with bioethics since many, many years. And this session will be on the interaction between science in general and human beings. So we will talk, all the speakers will talk about emerging technologies in very different meanings, but above all the interactions of emerging technologies with the possibility to intervene in the human body, in the human being. So we will have a very interdisciplinary panel with scholars coming from many different disciplines, but the focus will be on the ethical challenges of the development of the technologies tailored to the specific technology. So we will, we hope to have a good discussion with the public, but also interaction between our speakers. So I will begin introducing the first speaker, Paolo Traverso. I will ask to keep the intervention in 10 minutes, if it's possible, so that we have time to discuss. So Paolo Traverso is AI expert. So we will talk about, he will talk about artificial intelligence that amazes, deceives, and does good. So he's AI expert, is director of many strategic projects in the Foundation Bruno Kessler in Trento, a city in the north of Italy, and he deals also with many ethical and legal questions. So he's a scholar, expert on a technical level, but also very much involved in interdisciplinary dialogue together with ethicists and legal and lawyers. Thank you, Paolo.
Thank you very much, Laura. May I have the... Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura, for this introduction. Thank you to the organization for this invitation to this very interesting conference. Let me start from the title of my contribution to this panel, Artificial Intelligence that Amazes, Deceives, and Does Good. Indeed, I believe there is no doubt that artificial intelligence is a very powerful technique today that really has amazed us by performing tasks that just a few years ago we believed couldn't be performed by a machine, but only by humans. It's really driving a revolution that we have never seen before. It also deceives us. The easiest example is generative AI generating fake news, generating fake images, but even worse, the fear of a very powerful technology that dominates us, dominates human beings. It also does good, can be very beneficial for human beings. Think about medicine, helping doctors to fight against chronic disease. But let me, first of all, now remember us what is today's AI, because the terminology is a bit misleading. We talk about intelligence, we talk about neural network, neurons, deep learning, deep reasoning. Actually, AI, today's AI at least, works very different from our brain, from intelligence. This is a very simple schema of a neural network for deep learning that you know very well. And after all, I mean, this is the basic underlying technology of all the very powerful technology today. Transformers, diffusion models, predictive models, generative AI, large language model, visual language model, foundational model, and so on. And in this network, it has what we call neurons, are those yellow dots. But they have really nothing to do with the neurons of our brain. They are mathematical, parametric function. And we train the network with a huge amount of data, a huge amount of examples, such that we adjust those parameters to make the network work, and amazing us in some cases. So here the point is clear. AI doesn't work like us. It's not human intelligence, at least today's AI. But if this is clear, then the next question is, obvious question, is it superior to human being, to human intelligence? Actually, the question posed this way doesn't make much sense. The good question is whether AI, in some specific tasks, outperforms human capability. Even in this case, the answer is yes. Look at this. Here is the result of a study, of an experiment, trying to compare AI capabilities with human capabilities in specific tasks like speech recognition, image recognition, language understanding. You see in this diagram, the zero-level dotted line represents human capabilities, while the colored lines represent the evolution, the increasing power of AI in this specific task. And look at the blue one. That is the one about image recognition. It has evolved very rapidly, and until in 2015, according to this benchmark, of course, has outperformed human capability. Very similar for voice, few years later, and even language with large language models, again, a few years later. So the point is, again, yes, in some specific task, it outperforms human intelligence. Should we be maybe amazed, but worried or hopeful about this? Apparently hopeful, because we all know the good things that AI can do for medicine. For instance, nowadays in Italy, in 34 hospitals, there is an AI system that is able to analyze the image of a retina of a patient, of a person that suffers diabetes, and to detect whether there is a retinopathy. And in this way, you can visit millions of patients that otherwise wouldn't be visited, because we will never have so many doctors, so many specialists to visit millions of people that suffer diabetes and unfortunately have this very common comorbidity. AI for fighting chronic disease like Parkinson, predicting the worsening of the disease can help doctor to fight Parkinson. Or nowadays we have systems that are able, given the image of a lung, to predict the danger, the probability to get a lung cancer with a very high precision. So accuracy, they say 95% accuracy in 1 year in advance, 85% accuracy in 2 years, 75% accuracy in 5 years. And similar things can be done with voice. So is this good? Apparently yes, but it depends. It depends how this is used, how all of the system, the process is designed. Because if I know that I'm risking to get diabetes because of my style of life, I can maybe change style of life and prevent. But if someone tells me in the wrong way, in the whole process, I can be anxious, fragile, vulnerable, and then maybe even get ill before getting the disease. So it really depends, can be very good and can be very bad. But this is AI today. What about AI tomorrow, the future of AI? The future of AI, by no doubt, will be more and more powerful. You see some topics of research. I mentioned before that neural nets have neurons that have nothing to do with our brain, but there is a lot of research in neuromorphic computing. Or that neuromorphic computing trying to have neural nets that mimic the functioning and the working of the brain. Autonomy. We do research for systems that are self-learning. that learn by themselves, that find themselves their own data. This is agentic AI in some way, own data, and they automatically train themselves, and they are able to understand, this is research yet, but there will be systems here, understand when they have learned enough to solve a given problem or to perform a given task, or they need even to learn more in a kind of continuous learning paradigm. With technologies like neurosymbolic approaches, we are able to understand not only the relation between data, but also the causality, what causes what. Or we have agentic AI that are systems that live in a given environment and build automatically a model of the environment, and they are able to understand when this model is no longer correct because the environment has changed significantly, and to auto-repair their model. This is the result, or mental model, even a bit more frightening maybe. System that by interacting with people, they understand the mental status, the cognitive capabilities, the cognitive status of the person they are interacting with. So, is this frightening? This is good? This is bad? It depends. It depends how the whole system is designed. This can be used to help doctors to build systems that will never, robots that will never hurt anyone. But, you know, the point is there are a lot of worries in any case. We should be aware. Indeed, there are a lot of worries about many different aspects. For instance, job losses, or I mentioned before, fake news that persuade people, environmental impact, energy consumption. A big worry is about the hand, as also some question before. This powerful technology is in the hand of very few companies that if they do only for their business, then this might be no good for humanity. But here I like to point out a subtle learning. A subtle learning. In spite of the fact that today's AI works different from humans, it's not like human intelligence. Already today's AI appears human, and even it will be more tomorrow. I've seen people to apologize to ChatGPT. I've seen people saying, I'm not go out this evening with friends because I stay at home with my AI system, with ChatGPT or Gemini or what it is. And this is a problem, because it is a big problem, because this is a subtle danger of confusing doing with being, of mistaking performance for essence, of confusing AI, that at the end is a machine, this is what I'm personally convinced, with people. So this is the reason why I'm here. We should all work together, not only engineers, not only computer scientists, but also experts in social and human science, also religious leaders and policy makers, philosophers, sociologists, and so to enlighten and enrich humanity, not to create this illusion, and to build an AI that enrich human identity, dignity, and personhood. It might be difficult with all the money that is invested in private company. We should try to do this. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. We're going to allow for some time for questions after each individual speaker, and then we'll have time at the end for more broad discussion with the entire panel. So any questions that we have, Alexander will bring the microphone to you. Please identify yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm Gaia Novarino from the Institute of Science Technology, Austria. I was wondering whether the part of AI that worries us is a problem not of AI, but the society, because it's filling, so AI eventually, in the example that you mentioned, is filling a gap for people to find something that obviously they don't find in our society, which is, company, I don't know, whatever you want to find there. And so maybe we should refocus a bit the discussion, not on AI, but what we are missing in our society. Just wondering.
Well, I agree very much with what you say. If there are people that, really I mean, there are very famous movies about this, like her, that find a good people with this technology that is because there is something else that is lacking. And indeed, I believe it would be important to work to provide all the environment, the context, such that AI cannot be the substitution of the replacement of something that is lacking in the society. So, yes. Technology is no longer something that can be, you cannot do good technology by itself. Of course, even researchers should be aware of trying to have a good technology, but of course, it's something that depends on the context. So fully agree with what you said.
Thank you, Maria Patrones from Portugal. I would like to remind the recent example of Anthropic, and under this example to ask, is it possible to have ethics for AI? Even the regulation, the European regulation, is being dismantled at this time. And the Anthropic example, I would say, following your slide, is worrying.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that a regulation alone by itself can really help much. It's needed, but regulation afterwards try to stop technology, and technology cannot be stopped. I was at a meeting with lawyers, and they were saying something like, AI is like, they said Ferrari, nowadays we should say Mercedes. Like, it's a car, very powerful car that drives 300 kilometers per hour, and we should pose limits to slower it. But if you 20 kilometers per hour, that was the example. If you do that, there will be illegal, unauthorized, with a lot of money, direction. So really, I believe that even AI Act, I have nothing against the AI Act, but AI Act alone is not enough in Europe. And then the regulation is not enough at all. Yes, so we should go in that direction. We should really work together in order to consider, when we do a system, not only the performance, not only the economical benefit, but all the ethics issue of AI. We should try to work together on that, I believe.
Just a quick question on following up on that. So you mentioned agentic AI has that ability to process and improve itself, so it can self-correct. What does perfection for AI look like versus perfection for human beings?
Perfection for human being, yeah. A system like that can be very useful in given context. For instance, in a factory, if it has something that correct, if it's something that understand that the production line should change, can be very useful. A system in a hospital, the important point, I believe, is that there is also this kind of augmented intelligence in which even if I understand, I have a system that understands that there is something wrong and correct itself, communicate in the right way with the professionals, with the people. The example that I made about the system for retinopathy for diabetes, that is definitely useful. It's better, doctors say, is much better than us because it's more precise, it's more accurate. But it does something such that when there is a problem, you send the patient to the doctor. So the doctor is, the human is in the life. So there are many applications, I believe, of self-correcting systems that could be very useful for people, for human beings. But it must be really designed.
Yeah, my only concern with that is, and I've heard that before, that a doctor will always be in the loop. But my concern is, what about our young doctors who are being educated on AI? Mm-hmm. Will they ever disagree with AI? Will they ever dare to say, oh no, that's wrong, I must be right, and AI is wrong?
Yeah, so there are a lot of studies that compare, I mean, the decision when the doctor thinks in one way and the AI thinks in that way. This is very useful study because go towards at least considering and being aware of that problem, maybe not solving the
Do
problem.
we have anything on? Okay.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I am a doctor and I'm strongly using AI in our system for surgery and also for early diagnosis. But the problem is also what is the responsibility? Sometimes we disagree with the AI. Well, I disagree, but what is my power to accept my disagreement and to take the decision for my patient in comparison to the powerful image of what is AI? Then what I don't agree is to call it intelligence. It's not an intelligence. It's a logic capacity which originates from the information that you have put in the machine, more information. And then while humans, in humanity, the intelligence comes out also from the doubts, came from our inside. And in medicine, we have also the perception. You have the capacity to have intuition facing the individual who bring you to the diagnosis. And then this is my comment about it, even though I am using normally.
You know better than me, but we work with the doctors and the people that really work on the field. We know very well that problem. The way in which it's really a problem of responsibility. And I agree with you that we shouldn't call it human intelligence. It is a different kind of intelligence. Nobody read so many books like large language model read. Nobody had so many examples like any neural network for predictive model had. So what we do, when you there are a lot of experimentation, but then when you go to the clinical practice, really you should try to define a clear protocol, a clear procedure in order to take into account the problem that you mean. For instance, to have many people that then analyze what the AI said and then discuss that. It is a problem, but I believe with a good procedure during the clinical practice, during really the working with the real data we can address the problem in order, as you said, to exploit the power of AI in a good way. But we should be aware of the problem.
Well, thank you very much. This was great. And thank you for your questions. And we will have time at the end for a more broad discussion.
So now I introduce the second speaker, Céline Lafontaine, from the University of Montreal. She has a PhD in sociology, but she's really very much involved in topics related to biomedical science.
The pointer.
So biomedical science and bioeconomical questions. So she will deal with another topics, always related to technologies and interaction with human being, that is specifically in the reproductive technologies. So the title is From the Bio-Objectification of Human Oocytes to the Promises of Cryopreservation, Conceiving Human Life in the Bioeconomic Age. Thank you.
Thank you. My presentation? Okay. So, good morning. I would like first to thank the organizer for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's a great pleasure and an honor to me to have the opportunity to present part of my research on the bioeconomy of human body. To set the scene, let me begin with a concrete example. As population aging and declining birth rates have become major concerns in many countries, the French government launched a national fertility plan on February 5th this year to raise public awareness about the growing problem of infertility. Among the measures proposed by that fertility plan, to counter declining birth rate of cryopreservation of oocytes. That is the extraction, culturing, and freezing of the eggs of young women in order to extend the fertile period to in vitro fertilization. By normalizing and promoting the banking of an ever-increasing number of human oocytes, France is effectively marking the entry into what may be called in vitro civilization. One of the most significant biotechnological developments in the 20th century was the ability to extract, isolate, maintain in life, and freeze cells outside a biological organism. As the sociologist Anna Landecker has shown, this possibility has not only opened the way to a redefinition of what it means to be a biological being, but has also profoundly transformed what it means to be human. Originating in techniques developed in industrial agriculture, in vitro fertilization leads to the development of procedures that make it possible to select, freeze, store, and exchange embryos and gametes, enable the births of millions of children outside the cycle of natural reproduction. Beyond the ethical debates surrounding the status of embryos and gametes, the freezing and banking of oocytes now lies at the very center of a globalized bioeconomy of assisted reproduction. Since the early 2010s, improvement in oocyte vitrification techniques have intensified the processes of extraction and bioobjectivation of human reproductive cells. The suspension of biological vitality through the cryopreservation of oocyte participate in a broader transformation in the way the temporality of human life is conceived by alternating the parameters of reproduction itself. Initially proposed for adolescent girls and young women diagnosed with cancer requiring treatments that could compromise their fertility, such as chemotherapy and radiotherapy, the freezing of oocyte inevitably involves an additional layer of medicalization for patients who are already ill or physically weakened. When examining the biomedical reasoning and bioethical frameworks that led to the transnational expansion of elective egg freezing among healthy young women, one is confronted with a classical case of biomedicalization in the sense that the development of a new biomedical possibilities tends to generate new uses that were not necessarily anticipated at the outset. Potentially addressing all young women of reproductive age, the cryopolitics of elective egg freezing rests on a systematic devaluation of the female body and on the promise of freeing women from the constraints of biological clock in order to extend the fertile period. The rapid expansion of social egg freezing in many countries, together with its growing promotion in public policy, has given rise to a larger body of social science research showing that a profound transformation in the relationship to the body, to the motherhood, and to the biological temporality is currently under the way in contemporary society. Once removed from the organic temporality of the body, the bio-objectified oocyte provide the material foundation for new forms of social technical anticipation. Behind this future-oriented logic, characteristic of neoliberal innovation policy, lies a moral economy in which women find themselves caught between the fear of future infertility and the imperative to optimize their reproductive potential. By channeling some of the most intimate hopes, aspiration, and desire for the future, the recent practice of social egg freezing illustrates the extent to which technoscientific anticipation for the future can become tyrannical. It is certainly not by chance that Facebook and Apple were among the first companies to introduce policy reimbursing social egg freezing in 2014 under the influence of Sheryl Sandberg, who at the time was one of Facebook chief executive. Social egg freezing can be understood within the broader framework of neoliberal biological citizenship, in which the optimization and strategic management of one's own body becomes a central value. It's important to think that in our ethical conception. Educated young women in highly technicized societies are the primary targets of this logic of the body as capital, as contemporary lifestyle and socio-economic expectation increasingly come into tension with the biological reproductive cycle. Since fertility typically begins to decline around the age of 35, elective egg freezing appears in this context as a socio-technical response to the anxiety many women experience in anticipation of possible infertility. Young women have therefore become the primary targets of campaigns encouraging the use of this practice, despite the still relatively low success rates of in vitro fertilization and the many risks associated with hormonal stimulation and egg retrieval. From a strictly medical standpoint, the oocyte retrieved and frozen within the framework of social egg freezing are obtained through the same procedures of in vitro fertilization and the many in vitro anticipation, the same procedure used in IVF, but in anticipating, and are increasingly presented by fertility companies as a form of fertility insurance. Young women are thus targeted by campaigns encouraging them to adopt this practice with slogans such as, "The biological clock, take control of your fertility. Egg freezing gives you the freedom to wait. Invest in your future family." Although the market for elective egg freezing clearly promotes an entrepreneurial vision of biological citizenship, it will nevertheless be naive to assume that reality conforms of the promise of advertising. Several recent studies conducted among women who have frozen their oocyte show that postponing motherhood is rarely the result of a deliberate emancipatory choice. More often, this decision is shaped by material, professional, and affective circumstances that lead women to delay their reproductive plan. Among the reasons most frequently mentioned by women to explain their decision to freeze their eggs, the absence of stable romantic partner and financial insecurity generally come first. The prolongation of higher education and the increasingly demands of professional life are also commonly cited as factors motivating the desire to extend fertility. Faced with the emotional burden generated by norms of personal and professional fulfillment that have become increasingly difficult to reconcile. Women who choose to phrase their oversight are often driven less by an immediate desire for motherhood, by a wish to protect themselves against the possibility of future regret. The temporal gap between social fertility, the moment when women feel ready to assume motherhood, and biological fertility, therefore emerges as one of the main factors leading women to turn for elective egg freezing. For a growing number of women, anticipated infertility leading to egg freezing represent a response to the anxiety produced by increasingly demanding norms of motherhood that are difficult to reconcile with a biological limited reproductive timeline. Presented as a way of remedying the biological inequality between men and women, elective egg freezing can be understood as a socio-technical response to the perceived inadequacy of the female body when compared to models of technological performance and productivity. The promises promoted by the fertility industry conceal the unequal distribution of treatments and risks borne by the women who undergo egg retrieval and cryopreservation. The hope of postponing the biological deadline in order to conform to social norms that have become unrealistic for many women obscure the economic, cultural, and social paradoxes upon which this emerging in vitro civilization is built. Given the number of children eventually born through elective egg freezing will remain minimal compared with the massive number of oocytes extracted and stored in fertility clinics around the world, an important question remains. What future uses will be made of this precious reproductive bioobject whose scientific and economic value remains potentially immense? My argument today is that the rise of elective egg freezing should not only be understood as a new reproductive technology, but also as a broader transformation in the way contemporary societies organize, anticipate, and govern the biological future of human life. In this sense, the cryopolitics of social egg freezing raises a fundamental question. What then does it mean to be human in the age of in vitro civilization? This is an immense question to which obviously I have not a definitive answer. Yet, it compels us to rethink the ethic of assisted reproduction for a broader perspective. Fertility itself, for both environmental and societal reasons, has become a fundamental issue of our time. In this context, the bio-objectification of oocytes appears less as a durable solution than as a technical attempt to respond to a far more fundamental issue: the meaning of human life in the age of life engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Lafontaine. We have, I think, about enough time for maybe one or two questions. But we went there.
Yes, I have to, first of all, I have to declare that I was one of the founders of in vitro fertilization in my younger time. And I think that you have to change the question. Normally, if you are a Bible reader, pregnancy went during the spring of the female life. The young woman, she's approached to the young man. This was the destiny of the family. then everything changes since that time, and you go now in times where diseases, they can touch female fertility before that she can be realized. Diseases such any kind of disease, but also that now we push our young women to make education, to have a career, to postpone the time of pregnancy. The pregnancy incidence in a woman of 17, 18, 20 years is more or less 95%. The pregnancy rate in a woman of 30 years is 70%. Of a 35 years is 50%. Of a 40 years is 20%. Of a 42 years is 0%. I'm sorry, it's very late. Then I think that since the moment that I suggest to my daughter to make an evolution in her education and to go on in the society, I have also to think about that probably we can also have to save her oocyte. And you have to calculate that you have one pregnancy, you need to have at least 25 oocytes to be sure that you will have a pregnancy, 25 oocytes, and 25 oocytes of a woman of less than 35, Then the collection have to be done this year. I think is misleading.
We need a question, though. Yeah.
The question is, I think that the problem of egg freezing has to be linked to the problem of delay of pregnancy for human beings. This is a necessity. Also because to have a pregnancy at 60 should be with your own eggs, with your own partner. When the society allows you to have it, the born at 60 will have longer time with its mother living in comparison to any individual born until 17th century.
Thank you. In fact, you just you said exactly what I said, but not in the same point of view. Because first, if we took the social effect, anthropogenic effect of in vitro fertilization today, and the suffering and a lot of women, because still today, after 50 years, it's only 30% success for one fertilization. You know that. So it's a lot of loss. It's a lot of suffering for women, and they are a risk. And you know, all the development in human engineering come from the eggs they are extracted. For me, it's an extraction from women about the fact that the biological clock is not in relation of the lifestyle. This is a real issue, and the response cannot be we're going to extract oocyte and store them, and after that, because first it's a lie, because it's not sure that a woman who's going to freeze their eggs will be used, and also they're going to have more than the specialist on this question already knows that it's going to science laboratory. So women will pay with their body the development of life engineering, because the biological of female body are not fitting in the society. And in my opinion, it's that way that we are to think about also artificial intelligence, because you know that's something with the machine, with the obsession with the machine, that when the body and the reproductive, we come from evolution. We are a biological organism, and when the reproduction itself became a social and technical issue, there are something wrong in that civilization. For me, it's that, because it's when the outside that there are a lot of suffering and also a lot of oppression of women, and it's a big business, and it's only for higher women come from higher class of society. There are a lot of issues there, and of course I know that in a very liberal perspective that this is acceptable, but if we think in environmental and Anthropocene problem, the way we conceive reproduction today, it's the key to to understand a lot of things. Thank you.
Okay, we kind of filled up all the time with that. Okay, we'll save your other questions for the end when we have general discussion. But we'd like to move on now for our third panelist, who will bring a slightly different perspective, but one that we recognize is absolutely fundamental to our discussion. And that is the people who are supposed to benefit from all these technologies. And how do we engage with those people? So representing that group and that perspective is, and I'm going to try and get this right, Corné Baatenburg de Jong?
Nearly good.
Oh, all right, who is Deputy Director of the Dutch Arthritis Society. Please.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me and the Dutch Arthritis Society here in Rome. Thank you for the invitation, Ralph. Thank you for the Pontificalo for inviting me. Thank you, Stephanie, for organizing and preparing all these things. And it's an honor for us as representing the patients, let's say from the arthritis perspective, but also from all over the world here during this Congress. And I will have probably a different view, and I'm not a professor. I'm from background of business economist, so that's a little bit of a different perspective probably. But the Dutch Arthritis Society and other patients' organizations are working already a long years on bringing solutions and treatments to patients in their disease field. So a little bit of my talk is about science and human being, the perspective of a societal, let's say a patient organizations, a life science health perspective. But before I go further on, I need to tell you a little bit about the disease field where I am working in, because otherwise you can say, yeah, what are you talking about? We are talking about all rheumatic diseases with an estimate on 1 billion of people all over the world. So 1 on the 9 people is suffering from the disease of rheumatic diseases. And there are more than 100 types of the disease. Most common known are rheumatoid arthritis, are osteoarthritis, gout diseases, systematic scleroderma, and lupus, but there are a couple more. And it's about 15% of the people that are suffering from only the disease of osteoarthritis. So that's already a lot. So we are speaking on behalf of a lot of patients all over the world. And although there are also a lot of comorbidities. Probably you know that people from osteoarthritis also suffering from diabetes or cardiovascular diseases. That's some facts about our disease field. And you see in the figure only a schedule of the Netherlands. Then you see, and it's a very small line, there's the yellow line, but it's the line of osteoarthritis disease, which is rising rapidly till 2050. So yeah, the people are aging, that's one of the facts, but also other circumstances in food, etc., are occurring these rising numbers. So that will double only in the Netherlands the numbers of people suffering from osteoarthritis. And yes, it's not an emotional disease, let's say it in this way, as there is oncology or other diseases, but I think it's a disease where we have an economical perspective to find solutions in front of it. A little bit about the Dutch Arthritis Society, because that's also good to know. We are a hybrid organization. It's not so common in other countries all over the world. But on the one hand, we are a fundraising organization with private donations, with public subsidies from the Netherlands government and also from Europe and also from investors. We are a grant-giving organization, financing research, independent research in the public domain, as told this morning, because that's the basic of all our work, financing research, science in the public domain. And we are also an investor in small and medium enterprises. So when it's going from the public domain to the private domain, I'll tell a little bit more later on about it, then we are also investing in this aspect. And third, and that's made it completely hybrid, we are also a patient organization. So we are speaking on behalf of the patients in the Netherlands, we are speaking on behalf of the patients in Europe when it's about osteoarthritis. So we are giving information, we are advocating for patients, and we are a patient partner in research. And last but not least, we are also a strategic partner, and we call it a societal implementation partner organization. A little bit of the examples, what we are doing. What you see here is the figures of the amount of money we can create with our money, the Dutch Arthritis Society, in Europe. This is only in Europe. With €1, we can create 8 euros for research every year. So this is our role in the field of rheumatic diseases and osteoarthritis. And I know there are some other colleagues also in Canada and USA and Australia, but not so common as the Dutch situation is. The Dutch situation has a long history of these donations from private, and what we know is that already for 70 years, and it was last week again in the Netherlands, we have a door-to-door collect situation. There are going volunteers around all the doors collecting money, and it brings us, our organization, only already 5 million a year. So this is good to know how it works in the Netherlands. Our main focus, it's about quality of life, creating solutions for patients which are suffering every day from their disease or diseases. Not only suffering from their disease, but also suffering from comorbidities, from fatigue, from solitude, from not able to participate in work or volunteer work. And what we do is creating solution and treatments for patient engagement, patient communities, patient information, being a partner in research programs. But first of all, we are there for great results. But we know that when you go onto the street 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you saw in the public domain people suffering from the diseases with the rheumatic disease aspects, wheelchairs, etc. When you go around now, you will not find them immediately. You will find them, we saw the numbers, but not immediately, not physically. There were a lot of great examples where there were treatments for people suffering from rheumatoid arthritis and other diseases. But it was also not only bringing solution, but also costing a lot of money. So our main focus is quality of life, but, and I'm not here only for the Netherlands, I'm here for representing, let's say, more or less the world. There is a complexity of availability of solutions and accessibility of solutions. In the Netherlands, probably, I'm careful to say this, solutions are available, treatments are available, although it becomes more and more difficult. But when we have a look to other countries, and we don't have to go so far, when I go from the Netherlands to Spain, the climate is what we said till 5 years ago, better in Spain than in the Netherlands. Now it's changing. But in Spain, it's already more and more difficult to get the treatments we are having available on a daily practice. When we go to Africa, a completely other world. So we are trying to act as a societal organization to bring this affordable with a real reimbursement possibilities, and not at what we see at the current moment, and that is great. The development in science is going fast and rapidly, and we saw already a lot of examples this morning. For example, in our disease field, there are currently treatments for CAR T cells, with CAR T cells or T-cell engagers. But each treatment costs at least 350,000 till 450,000 euros. Are we able to pay this? Are we willing to pay this? And we know the situation geopolitical, we know the situation economical, but we know also the field of the big pharma. Yeah, so these are the complexities we are suffering with and dealing with. So we are positive about innovation, always based on science and scientific evidence, published in wallpapers, etc., and not from commercial markets, etc., so based on science. But the question in our types of organization is, can and should we advance an innovation in future? At its core, it's always yes, because we are on earth for treating patients and bringing solutions for patients to the market. But we have also to think about the affordability of healthcare. How far should we go, and what if? Sometimes it could be luxury. That's what we need to consider also. And that's what we are doing as a patient organization. So science, which leads to new treatments, always needs to think about cost effectiveness. Is 350,000 euros the right price per patient for a treatment, or do we need to say, okay, this is too much? When we implement new solutions, we have also the task to de-implement other things. And that's what we see in the more economical phase. For example, in the Netherlands, there was a couple of months ago a study about the combined lifestyle intervention situation, where it's about movement and sleep, etc. And everybody will say to you, up till 3 months ago, when you have a combined lifestyle intervention, that's good for your osteoarthritis disease in your knees. But there is no scientific evidence for this. So when this is paid by the reimbursers in the Netherlands, had this combined lifestyle intervention. So what we are doing now as a patient organization, going back to the insurance companies and tell them, this is not an effective treatment. De-implement this. And then the first thing they asked me, you're from a patient organization, why are you doing this? Because this is not based on evidence. We have to go to the evidence-based solutions. And what we need to do is work interdisciplinary. Science and being, yes, for sure, necessary for humans, but at the same time there might be a limit. And that's what we are talking about. Together we can create the best quality of life. That's what is our purpose, our aim. So, open for questions, feedback and remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have questions for, I've got,
Yep.
oh, we got one on the,
Yeah, we have an online. We have an online question. Yes. The question is: these complexities related to access could be solved by promoting academic solutions or products, so not developed by pharma, but rather publicly. Is this your opinion?
That's one way of thinking, I think. Academic solutions that are possibilities for accessibility and affordability, but there is another problem, that's regulation. When we bring treatments and solutions to the market, then it always needs to be done by the studies designed by the regulators. And what discussed with my neighbor this morning already, when the regulators will still say you need a randomized controlled trial, and when it's about osteoarthritis, a disease-modifying treatment, then you have to treat around, what they are telling me now, for the clinical trial phase 3, 10,000 patients, then it's not a possibility for the academic situation. When you're talking about very rare diseases in the rheumatic field, when it's about CAR T cells for myositis like that, yes, then that could be an option, but still it will cost you around 150,000 euros. But yes, let's try and discuss with each other what needs to be done in the public domain and what needs to be done in the private domain. And what we prefer is create hybrid solutions between private and public domain.
great. Another quick question. You have various streams of revenue coming in.
Yep.
You have various foci for what you want to do with that. How does that decision get made? What percentage of what goes where? And is there donor designated funds, they give, or do you have other ways of doing that?
No, yeah, that's specific for the Dutch situation. What we get is yearly around 25 million, 30 million euros income stream, and we can afford it ourselves to give it away for research for 25 million euros a year, and that's based on a scientific advisory board and a patient advisory board. And they made together a 50-50 shared decision on what needs to be done and what needs to be granted. So we have another situation than from the USA, where it's very donor-based research. This is, let's say 98% open for giving away.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. I will take this opportunity, move on to our final panelist. And our final panelist is Monica Consolandi, who is from the Fondazione Bruno Kessler up in Trento, another representative from Trento. And her focus is on ethical and linguistic aspects of communication between healthcare professionals and the patients and the family. She earned her PhD in philosophy at Vita Soluta San Raffaele University in Milano, and she is also a consultant to the Pontifical Academy for Life in the Vatican City on topics of beginning and end of life and the ethics of technologies. And she collaborates with several Italian institutions, surprisingly enough, other international institutions such as NCCR, Molecular Systems Engineering in Basel. So a few connections today. But we're going to hear her perspective on the use of AI and communication.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So good morning, everyone. I'll end with the beginning, so linking my presentation to Paolo Traverso's one, actually, because I'll talk about AI here. But to do so, I will actually start from language, because I can tell you that I'm very attached to this topic. I think every one of us knows the power of language, but the problem hidden in the power of language is that it can be both positive and negative. So language can be a bridge or a barrier. And we can say that this happens because speakers have their own rules when they speak to each other. This is, I'm not creating anything here. This comes from philosophy of language. And especially maybe some of you know Professor Malherbe, who actually sort of created the definition of a third language game. So this happens when we have two speakers talking to each other and they want to convey their meaning, right? So they sort of create a third language game in which their rules are shared and new rules are also created. That's the purpose of language, in also everyday language. So we can actually represent this concept like this. We have two speakers. Well, let's simplify it. We just have two speakers for now. And they create a sort of third groups that is their shared meaning. What is really interesting for us today is that it's even more delicate when it comes to doctor-patient interaction. So when we have the two speakers that are in this very delicate field, that is the healthcare sector, you can imagine how it is even more important to study why and how language can be a bridge or a barrier. And this is because we know for sure that language has an impact, especially on therapeutic path. So we know for sure that when you have positive impact, you have a strong therapeutic alliance, you have positive outcome in terms of treatment and care, while when you have negative impact, these really affect the patient's health. So, about today and artificial intelligence, what happens when we add another speaker that is AI? Because I will propose this vision of AI as a third speaker here. Because we have AI-based tools that are nowadays used from both the pole of this relationship. So both from patients and from healthcare professionals in general. I always refer to the pole with doctor and patient just to simplify, but you can imagine that I'm talking about healthcare professionals in general and patients and their environment, so also families and caregivers. So it's very difficult to understand where to put AI-based tool. And also because we have so many AI-based tools, as Paolo Traverso showed us. So I won't dig in very much about this, but we have chatbots, we have imaging, we have predictive AI tools, so many of them. What is really interesting for us today is what kind of AI we want. And for sure, we want AI to be ethical, precise, and respectful of human values. To sum it up, we can say that we want a trustworthy AI, but this means so many things. And yeah, so we talk about today we talk about regulations, and we said it is not enough to regulate the use of AI. So I will propose here, let's say it's not a different approach, it's a complementary one, because we started from a different method. We talk so much today about the multidisciplinary approach. It's very difficult to pursue it in reality. And so we tried, starting from, of course, our side of expertise. So I will show you very briefly an example of what a multidisciplinary approach can be, with the goal in mind to develop an AI-based tool that is ethical. And with ethical, of course, I mean so many features and characteristics, but most of all, that is respectful of human beings, in order to then develop and create and then manage an AI-based tool solution that we know for sure from the beginning that is admissible. So what we did was to, since communication is so important, and as I said, it can have both positive and negative impact. We studied misunderstanding in doctor-patient interaction to start, precisely to understand what happened when something goes wrong, and maybe being able in future to fix it, if not to prevent it. And of course, we use the lens of the philosophy of language because, again, it's our field of expertise. And so we used basically 3 philosophers of language, big names, such as Grice, Austin, and Wittgenstein, to guide our analysis. And we did this analysis on real doctor-patient conversations that I collected during COVID-19 about the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. So you can see that this is a very small sample. We can consider this study to be just a pilot. In fact, we were actually expanding our data set also with other specialties and other contexts and other moments, because this was a very punctual one. And we ended up with a total of 48 misunderstandings. I won't show you today because it's, very specific. But what is interesting for us today is how can we integrate our findings in an AI-based tool solution that can be supportive. So again, what we did was to start from qualitative research and with a very specific expertise field, that is philosophy of language. Of course, we also integrated an ethical perspective while we pursued the analysis. And we were able to identify these different labels, let's call it this way. In qualitative analysis, we have labels to identify misunderstanding. So we had a set of misunderstanding. And this qualitative research can be helpful in many ways, to educate doctors, to educate patients also, and to kind of help the speakers to orient themselves in the conversation. But it can also be helpful to develop an AI-based tool, and that's the idea in my unit at FPK. So to develop an AI-based tool that is actually, in this case, linguistic, that can be supportive to the doctor-patient relationship. This can mean many ways of developing an AI-based tool. Maybe it will be, of course, it will be LLM based, so of course based on language, but this can be, let's say, used online or offline to help doctor and patients during their conversation or after their conversation. As you can see, this wants to be just an AI tool that is just supportive, so of course not substituting any part of the communication in any ways. And of course we have so much to do to develop this tool yet, but our starting point comes from reality, and that's really important because often AI tools are developed without taking into account how reality works, especially for the healthcare sectors. And so what really is striking for us today is that when we talk about language and specifically about AI tool that are language-based and developed for the healthcare sectors, we are actually trying to reply to both of the guiding questions of these days. So we're talking about the structures, the capacity and the limits of life, but we're also talking about the speakers, so the person, their identity and their dignity, that of course science can never fully measure. I totally agree with this, of course, but at the same time science can try to, maybe science should try to recognize it. So, thank you. It was very brief.
Thank you. So we'll start with questions specific to Professor Consolandi. We've got one here. Alexander, thank you.
So I missed a bit somewhat the context of the language as a barrier or as a bridge in relation with AI. So are there studies indicating that AI can contribute to facilitate the role of language as a bridge versus barrier between patients and clinicians?
Yeah, we have studies about AI as a barrier, actually, because you can imagine that now, well, actually not that different from Dr. Google. So now patient goes to the clinical consultation, and probably most of them have previously, let's say a lot of them, to be fair, have previously consulted ChatGPT or LLMs to, you know, have, let's say, an overview of their condition. So this can be a barrier in their interaction with physicians, also because physicians just don't appreciate very much this third interlocutor. But at the same time, we are trying to develop an AI tool that can be a bridge. So we don't have studies about this yet, because it's brand new. So our idea is to, develop this tool that can be a bridge, hopefully. So something that can support their relationship, but we don't know if it works. And of course, this is a part of what we have to do, to study if it works, because maybe it works itself, but not in the context of doctor-patient interaction.
So a platform that is specifically designed to mediate this interaction.
Yes.
So, Monica, I want to ask you, as far as I know, there are many tools that try to bridge the relationship between doctors and patients in the informed consent application, so that to tailor better the information to the conditions of a patient. So do you know something about? And the second question, very small, on the cultural settings. So can you maybe improve your ideas in a multicultural context, where the problem is the language, but also the culture?
Okay, yeah, thank you for your question. So for the first one, we're actually, as I said, we're expanding our data set, and one of the contexts we are studying is the anesthesiological preoperative context, consultation. And so, you know, you have an informed consent about anesthesia, and you have the medical record and all the clinical information that the doctor is supposed to convey to the patient. And it's very interesting to notice that we didn't expect this, but since we also give a form to the patient to be filled with information to check if they fully, let's say, understood all the information that the physician conveyed to him or her, we are finding out that actually patients don't give a feedback about risk, and you know that there's no risk zero in any surgery. So we are now checking where's the problem, because we have the information written on the informed consent, but often we find, I mean, it's not a finding yet because we're working on it, but most of the time it's the physician that doesn't fully convey all the information about risk. sometimes, of course, it happens that is the patient that sort of blank out, but this happens for obvious reason. But yeah, we're finding out that physicians don't convey all the information that they are supposed to. And so this would be very interesting for the informed consent part, because we always say that it's not just a form to be signed, but actually what happens in reality is that sometimes it is. And so this is a problem for sure. And about the second question, yes, this is planned. It would be very, kind of more difficult for us, because now we included only Italian native speakers to be sure to be able to sort of control their framework, so their cultural framework and their linguistic framework. But we want to, for sure, to expand this study with different cultural setting and different languages. For sure, we would need additional expert figures to do this.
So, thank you very much for your interesting talk. I would like to remind the Hippocratic triad, because your triad at the beginning reminded me of the Hippocratic triad. According to Hippocrates, you have the disease, you have the patient telling his sufferings, and you have the physicians who interprets his sufferings. Now, what's happening is that the technology is substituting this telling of sufferings and this interpretation of sufferings between the doctor and the patients. So we are moving, and this has been the evolution of medicine towards the centuries. This has been the method. Now we are moving to a medicine without the telling of suffering. And that's why I appreciate your attempt, because it doesn't substitute, but it helps. And if I may, I also have a comment for Céline Lafontaine.
Hang on to the microphone, just 1 second. Okay, we'll transition, all right? And we're going to move now to, you can look at this diverse group up here. And by the way, just to tell you how diverse the group is, my name is Kevin FitzGerald. As you can see, I am a Jesuit from the United States. I am chair of the Department of Medical Humanities at Creighton University School of Medicine, both in Omaha and in Phoenix. But my actual background is also in cancer genetics research. So you have a breadth of expertise here you can check with. So please start off the questioning.
Yes, thank you also for your very interesting talk. Regarding the use of all these frozen oocytes, I remember about 30 years ago, I read that you could buy a frozen oocyte, of course for heterologous fertilization, in Romania for something like 200 euros, but it could cost more than $100,000 if it came from a student at Harvard University.
In fact, people must know that the cryopreservation of oocyte, it was very difficult before the 2010s, because the vitrification of oocyte is specific for sperm. So you are talking more about the sperm bank, but it's the same logic. Of course, all the reproductive assisted reproduction economic, it's based on the selection and on what Habermas died last week, the German philosopher, called liberalogenism, because it's the fact that we are in the project of selecting, and I just want to explain what they are in the shadow of my presentation. It's the fact that if we have to change the women body, if we have to adapt, if we have to put them on hormonal therapy, extract and make and suffer, because if you ask every woman who are in in vitro fertilization process, they are suffering, they are at risk, and if it's going to be normalized, that way of it's mean that we are in a transhumanist soft way. It's very deeply rooted in our society right now. And the women are the first target. Why? Because the biological body are not so easily adaptive of the machine process. So, and you are right, they are, of course, the logic of selection of eugenist is a part of this economy.
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring a question from the internet that actually gets at our question before about the need for a very broad worldwide consultation. This comes from the Right Reverend, and I again apologize for if I mispronounce your name, Yoshinobu Miyake, who is chair of the board of the institutional affiliation of the International Shinto Studies Association. And Reverend Miyake is a Shinto priest in Japan. He signed on to the Rome call for AI ethics. He has a question. Do we also need to include beyond the sort of Christian, Abrahamic, monotheistic perspective of responsibility requiring a physical form, so AI cannot be responsible in that regard because it lacks the image of the creator. And he says this is also evident in some polytheistic traditions, but Shinto is an animistic tradition. So is it important to also look from that perspective at engineering living organisms themselves? He said, I believe that one's perspectives on science and human being will differ depending on whether one views humans as special beings entrusted by God or gods with a responsibility to respond, or as merely one form of life among others, such as plants and animals, that should work together to shape the world, as the perspective comes from Shinto. So, when you do throw it open to the world, you get some really good questions. So thank you, Reverend Miyake, and anybody want to dive in on that?
Yeah. So I have this idea that machines are different from human beings. It is something that I put in front of everything.
Would they be different from any living organism?
This becomes even more delicate. So it's very good question. I believe I don't have an answer for that. I'm very worried about, this was mentioned even before, by this kind of symbiotic, they call also digital twins, because digital twins of a factory is okay, digital twin of a city is okay, if this allows optimization of services, but we are not something to optimize. So in a certain sense, I believe there is a difference, and we should keep in mind this kind of difference. With animals, I love my dog, so I don't know. It's very difficult to, it's really a very personal point about this. I don't have an answer to that, but we should be really very aware. I'm very much interested in the difference between AI and the rest of the world, and that should be kept, I believe.
Thank you. One thing I'll throw in as a biologist, I think one could draw a distinction between all living organisms and AI, which we would consider in some regards to be non-living, in part because of our definition of what it means to be a living organism, right? So that we have to challenge ourselves. Do we need to change that definition? But if we do not change it, then I think one can make a fairly clear distinction between any living organism and AI, which would allow us then to argue the goals of any living organism, one of which is to reproduce, the other is to survive long enough to reproduce, another is to have a metabolism sufficient to survive long enough to reproduce, so you can just keep building from there. So I bet a great question, and one that we would have to definitely seriously take into consideration as AI continues to mimic more and more closely what living organisms would want to do. My understanding is some agentic AI programs actually also want to reproduce and survive in spite of what humans might want for them. Yep.
May I? Just a little reflection is about we wouldn't have AI now if there are no human beings. Because to have AI, we need personal computer, we need data coming from human beings, we need algorithms. So, I don't know, I am a little bit against the idea that, AI is the center of the world, because we are the one who construct AI. So, technology is not a destiny. That was the title of a conference, and I keep it in mind because we have AI because of a human being. So.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would never give citizens of responsibility to AI. I know that sometimes this is done in a good sense, like, I mean, saying that they should pay taxes. You know about Bill Gates, but it should be pay taxes the people who created this AI. Yes, so I agree with you. I agree in this sense, keeping this difference.
Yeah, I totally agree with you too. And maybe this also applies to engineered living organisms, because as far as they need us to be developed and sort of created, engineered, I think that's the answer.
Okay.
Again, Gaiano Marino from Austria. I was wondering about the part of freezing oocytes. Being a biologist, I mean, in vitro fertilization and oocyte freezing was developed because of a need, right? And women suffering because they could not have kids. And I lack a little bit in your discussion, how would you propose to have a balanced conversation on how women can make an informed decisions and feel free to make that decision, being one or another, and yet not being pointed as good or bad?
My point is not about good or bad. It's about a civilization issue. So, but it's a good question. But the question is more deep. In a sociological point of view, historical point of view, the desire of children, it's a social construction. It's different from society to society. It's come from the possibility to, there are a lot of, I don't have time to explain that, but if you want to have the idea of the desire of children, you need to have the possibility to don't have children. And the most civilization, the reproduction was a normal way of no choice,
I would argue as a biologist that is not a social construction. Sorry, I mean, this is a biological
I'm not talking about the biological, I'm talking about the social construction of desire. Okay? So first, the second thing, it's that the reason why women, there are a lot of infertility issues right now. First one, it's this lifestyle that make the women decision to have children older. So this is an environmental issue. Also, we are in a liberal society. There are a lot of people who choose to have children alone, to have homosexual couple. There are a lot of reasons to use cryopreservation. My question is why we put so much money to preserve, and also there are genetics and eugenic perspective there. And my question is, which kind of society we are confronted with that. Of course, there are a lot of suffering, but there are a lot of suffering, you know, to have cancer, to... I heard in the television in Quebec last week, a minister, she have in vitro fertilization, saying that that the infertility at 40, it's a disease. So aging body becomes a disease body, and this is the road of transhumanism thinking. And you asked me what I can say. I'm just trying to understand what is going on. Of course, private suffering, it's something very complicated, but and not just complicated. It's I'm sorry for my English, but the fact is that we are confronted with the fact that it's difficult to think limits and to think. And the balance is also if we put young women on the suffering for the future anticipation of fertility. I'm not talking about women who are confronted with infertility. I'm talking about the fact that we encourage young women to freeze their own oversight. It's not the same thing. And the fact they are not and. Statistically, it's not sure that the cryopreservation will give them the possibility to have children. It's a very complicated, and if we, because we are an ethical liberal point of view, but in a societal point of view, the reproduction technologies and ethicals, it's a good way to think about transhumanism and also about life engineering, because there are no easy risk and answer to the suffering of human being.
So I think that's a great example of the complexity of what we're wrestling with these 2 days. So thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut it off because we want to stay on schedule.